evening to those here and those that might be watching on the internet. We'll have a prayer in a moment, and we're going to look at Colossians. We're going to do the introduction, and I'll talk about that before I do it in just a moment. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, for this congregation, and the opportunity to look at your word and to try to gain something from it that might be useful in our lives. And we ask, Father, that you help us in our study this evening. Help us to be inquisitive. We're going to look at Colossians now. We're actually, this is going to be the first of three letters, and really a fourth, which is Philemon. I'm going to look at Colossians and work this for you some, and then Richard's going to do Ephesians, and Joe is going to do Philippians. Hopefully, our takeaway from this will be something that will appeal to our souls. It can help us in our life. Now, I've been accused of spending too much time on introduction, and you may accuse me of that after tonight. I think introduction is more than filler. I think introduction permits you to really grasp what's going on, the overall what's going on in the Scripture, so you don't just jump in. So that's what we're going to do. Here you look at, let's look at Colossians here. Here's two pictures, and what you have here is a couple of mounds. Now we'll talk about where Colossae is in a moment, but these two mounds are kind of interesting. Can you make the mounds out by any chance? Let me see, I don't know how well that is. There's a mound there and a mound there. These were discovered in 1835, but they've never been excavated. These are the ruins of a town called Colossae, okay? All right. Real quick, and I like to make sure that I've given credit. I don't use commentaries a lot. I use commentaries as fail-safes for things that I'm not quite seeing. And generally, not always, but generally, I don't really get a whole lot more when I start looking at the various commentaries because they're confused about the same thing I'm confused about. But anyway, those are the commentaries, giving credit where credit's due. I've always liked F.F. Bruce. He's been dead now for several years. He probably is my fail-safe, and Douglas Moo would be the other. None of these are from our brotherhood. All right, let's talk about Paul. We're going to talk in a moment, and I'm going to talk about, did Paul write Colossians? You're going to say, yeah, it says he did. Okay, we're going to talk about that, and we'll talk about reasons why a lot of folks, scholars nowadays, are talking about maybe he didn't and why he didn't. Okay? Okay, before you go any further, he wrote Colossians. Okay? All right, here's the life of Paul. Now the dates, don't get stuck on the dates, because there's several of you in here probably who have taught or have studied it, and you got different dates. You say, I don't think that's the date. I don't care about that. It's close. These are the dates I believe are real close to accurate. But for me, okay? But they certainly give you a path of Paul's life, okay? So, he was born about 4 A.D. When was Jesus born? Anybody know? B.C. About 4 B.C., okay? So he's about 8 years younger than Jesus, all right? And you see, you know that he was converted on the way to Damascus. What was he going to do in Damascus? Persecute Christians, right? That's what he was up to. He was a Pharisee. He says later he's a Pharisee of Pharisees. So this happened in about 32. So how old does that make him when he was converted? Can you do math? Better than I? Yeah, about 8. So 32 to 35, he spends 2 to 3 years in the Arabian desert. Now, I've heard people that didn't really get that. The Bible is clear. He spent 2 to 3 years in the Arabian desert, which, by the way, Arabian desert is defined really as anywhere, pretty much anywhere east of Damascus. Okay, so 2 to 3 years he spent. What was he doing out there in the desert? He was being taught by Jesus personally. And you need to understand, he spent his life really, if you'll read his letters, 13 of them, talking about that he was a bona fide apostle, one sent by Jesus. Well, he was, okay? In 35, he did go up. He saw Peter and James in Jerusalem. A brief meeting. He didn't see any others, and he says he wasn't taught anything by them. He just, in Galatians, it talks about this, and he said he simply went there, he met with them, and then he left. He went back then to Tarsus, where he was born. And by the way, as I put there, Tarsus was a Roman free city. In about 42 BC, it was made a free city. Cilicia and Tarsus was the capital of that particular area. All right. So he returned to Tarsus. We don't have any record what he did for those years. I don't know. I know as much as you do about it. He was recruited. Barnabas then went to Tarsus and got him back. Obviously said, you need to come back and come to Antioch and start teaching there. All right. 44 AD. He goes to Jerusalem. By the way, most of this is in, if you'll read the Galatian letter, he puts the path of his life, pretty much spells it out. By doing that and looking at Acts, you can pretty well glean this out. So he goes to Jerusalem with an offering to the poor. Then he makes 3 journeys between 45 and 57. And that's nearly, by me taking the map, and that's where I got it. So I'm going to say about 8,000 miles, mostly on foot. Maybe he had an animal occasionally. That's a long ways. That's a long ways to go for the gospel. On these trips, you find that he was beaten unmercifully several times, treated very badly, yet he persisted. What I want you to know is that Paul is an amazing human being. Who would I most like to have of anybody in the world ever have lunch with? Paul. And I just keep my mouth shut and listen. Okay, 58 to 60. He was arrested, and he was arrested in Jerusalem. He was taken to Caesarea Maritima, which was the Roman capital of Judea in that area. Okay, so he was taken there, accused by the Jews there in the temple, almost killed. Would have been killed had he not declared that he was a Roman citizen. Right. All right. And then he made a trip to Rome, expense paid by the Romans, to get a trial. And that was 60 to 61. All right? So he's in 60, how old is he? He's about 56 years old, 57 years old. Okay. A 2,300-mile trip. Pretty rough trip, even by boat. 61, 63, he's under house arrest, okay, in Rome. During that period is when these letters were likely written. There are some commentaries and scholars who will say, well, maybe it was written when he was at Caesarea. I don't see that. If it maybe so, we don't know absolutely for sure. It appears to have been written while he was in Rome during that first day, 60, 61, 62 All right. He was released from Roman confinement and in 63, so he had that brief release. In 64 to, say, 66, we don't know what he did exactly. I know a couple of places he was, okay? I can read in Acts, but we don't really know. Did he get to Spain? People say he didn't. Maybe he did. I don't know. He had a wish to go to Spain. At any rate, it's not fully accounted for where he was. And then 67, 68, he was again arrested in Rome, jailed, and beheaded in 68 by Nero, or Nero's people. Interestingly enough, so if he's 65 years old when he was killed, Paul is probably the oldest 65-year-old you have ever seen. Read what he put up with in his life. All that mileage, the beatings. He must have barely been able to walk. At any rate, killed then for the cause of Christ. Arrested, and he's going to say in this letter, he's arrested because, why? Because of the gospel of Christ. He's saying that Jesus is Lord. He's Kyrios. He is the Lord. And the Romans don't like it, and they've had all of it they can handle. Now here's Colossae where it is, and I just wanted to show you that there are 7 churches that are addressed in Asia Minor. Romans called what they called Asia is what we call Turkey, pretty close to the borders. So this is western Turkey, and you can see I've got 7 circles. Those are the churches addressed in the letter, the Revelation letter to 7 churches, right? And you see that Colossae is not addressed, and Hierapolis isn't addressed. So, but all of the rest there are, right? Except for a couple of others in the north. All right? Are we good with where we are? Yeah? Okay. Quickly. This is Paul. Let's just go quickly through his journeys. I'm just going to speed through them. I want to show you, first of all, that Colossae, you can see where it is, okay? I want to show you in all his journeys, he apparently never got physically to Colossae, okay? So this is a church that he has apparently never visited personally, all right? So there it is. I'm going to have a circle there without the point on it for the rest of these. There's journey 1. Didn't get there. Right? He's opened those churches there, right? Journey 2, he misses it, doesn't get there. Journey 3, almost gets there, but doesn't. Goes to Ephesus, he's going to, in the 3rd journey, spend about 3 years in Ephesus. And we're going to talk about that briefly in a moment, is how his connection to Colossae, perhaps. All right. And then, of course, the journey to Rome. All right? Questions? I don't want to go too fast. No? Okay, Colossians. Colossians and Ephesians were, I believe they're written about the same time. I believe, in fact, that they were delivered by Tychicus on the same trip. Those 2 letters are called the twins by many people. Colossians has 95 verses. Ephesians a little longer, 155 verses. But these twin letters, when you look at them, there are a lot of similarities. Few identical verses, but some real similarities. I count, and I've gone through these multiple times, I count about 73 verses that I see a distinct similarity. Okay? One author counts 78. I didn't go through his 78. There are a lot of them that are very similar. Written the same time, right? The same concerns. likely they would have some real similarities. If I wrote one letter to one of you and one to somebody else up the road at the same time, there would be similarities, right? Okay. Ephesians might be a circular letter. Think about that, okay? I didn't say it was, but it might be. Because he's going to talk about a letter sent to Laodicea, which we don't have. Now, we don't have several other letters that we know he wrote. I can see that he wrote to the church at Corinth at least 2 more letters than we have. Minimum 1 that everybody agrees to we don't have. So he certainly wrote letters that we don't have. I think, though, that the Ephesian letter is a circular letter. And I think it got to Ephesus, and it was delivered to Laodicea, probably Hierapolis, and some other congregation. Can I prove that? No. I'll just in passing, and I'll leave it to Richard, and Richard can come up with his own idea about it. But the letter to the Ephesians does not have to the Ephesians in it. Your copy may. It does not have it. The Greek does not have it. Some of the early versions of it do have as a heading, though, to the Ephesians. But it doesn't have it in the body. I think it's a circular letter for a lot of other reasons. It doesn't have any, it's not personal. He doesn't address any person in Ephesus. He stayed there 3 years teaching and doesn't address anybody personally. Anyway, that's a thought, okay? Because you're going to hear about in the Colossian letter, you'll hear about a letter he sent to Laodicea. He says, "Let them read your letter, and you need to read the one I sent to Laodicea." Okay. So Ephesians, here's the twins. Ephesians is about the church of the Christ, the body. If you want to do body and head, okay? And Colossians is about the Christ of the church, the head. And it's very clear. Go home and read both books. Be one and the other and say, yeah. His interest in the Ephesian letter is the body of Christ. We are the body of Christ. How should we act as the body of Christ? The Colossian letter is interested in the head. Christ is the head of the church. Okay? He's supreme. And we'll talk about why that is. What is he addressing? I'm just passing this one. I'll give this to you. Anyone that wants it later can get it. These are very similar, 8 similar passages in the twins, Colossians and Ephesians. By the way, they're not identical twins, they're fraternal twins, okay? Okay. All right. These are people named in the book. The book to the Colossians, okay? Personal people that are in here. The names are in this book, okay? Paul, of course, and he says it's from him, okay? And he says, I'm with Timothy. Now, I don't believe this is saying that Timothy and I wrote this together. I don't think so. It might be. Timothy was with him. Timothy was what? What did Paul call Timothy? He was pretty close. I could argue that. He's close to Timothy. That's his son in the faith. He was with him. He was there. I think he was well known. Timothy was a well-known figure. You know, he ends up in the church at Ephesus later on. He a very well-known guy. He likely, this is opinion, may have been his secretary. He may have written this thing. Did Paul ever have letters written for him? Virtually every letter. You'll find out if you read it thoroughly, you'll see that it was written by someone else. He dictated it, okay? Okay. Tychicus, he's going to bring the letter. He's the one that took the letter to, I believe, Ephesus and Colossae and the letter that's titled Philemon. He took those letters and delivered them. Don't know where he's from, do know, though, all of these, virtually all of these are trusted people with Paul, okay? All right. Onesimus, do you know that name? Philemon. What's the story of Philemon, real quick? Slave. Okay, Philemon owned a slave. He also was a major figure in the church in Colossae. Onesimus had left. How did he leave? It's against the law, okay, whether he stole stuff or what, and left. But he comes in contact with Paul in Rome, probably, and is converted. And now Paul is sending him back. And I don't want to get further into Philemon. So Onesimus is traveling with Tychicus, okay, or Tychicus, if that's the way you want to pronounce it. They're traveling with the letters, okay? Why wouldn't they send Onesimus by himself, by the way? He's a runaway slave. Okay? So he needs to have somebody with him to vouch for him. He's coming back. Okay? So anyway, okay, so that's named. Now, he says Aristarchus sends greetings. Mark, and he may come. Take care of it if it comes. And then a guy named Jesus called Justus. And these three are Jews. I want you to see something that I see anyway. These people, he says, are Jews. They're the only ones out of the group. These are Jews. Okay? Then he says, Epaphras is one of your number working hard. Now, he's the one we're going to find out, because you say, he never got to Colossae. How do all these churches get set up in Asia? How does that happen? Paul's one guy. It's people like Epaphras, okay? That's how the church moved the way it did. And thank God for Epaphras, okay? One of your number, he's working hard. Give some other information there about him here. We'll hear about him later, and as we read the letter, we definitely will. He talks about Luke. Luke's a beloved physician, and Demas sends greetings. Anybody knows Demas about him? Demas is going to leave him because he falls in love with the world later on, right? Right now, he's still with him. And Nympha's house, this is one of those several things in this letter or debates. Nympha's house church, I think it's in Laodicea. I think it's female. Some versions want to make it a male, and the word could be manipulated. At any rate, I think this is a female. She has a house church in Laodicea. And then Archippus, and he's a minister in Colossae, and I know that because I read Philemon. Okay? And he may be the son of Philemon when I read the letter. So anyway, now how do I know? What about Luke? What is the one book in the New Testament that wasn't written by a Jew? Luke and Acts. Yeah. And I said that long ago before I really knew. Somebody had told me in Sunset School preaching, and where I took courses, but I didn't know for sure. And somebody, when I said it like this, I was challenged by 2 or 3 people. Said, I don't think that's right. Well, it might not be right, but if you read this, Paul didn't include him as one of the Jews with him, and he pointed out 3. He said these are the only ones that are. So I don't think Luke was a Jew. Okay, that's a freebie. Okay, here's the written by part. Okay, now there's let me get to the orange part at the bottom first. About half of the scholars today who are what I would call more liberal scholars, and some would take a great offense at that. Okay. Dunn is one that I do like his commentary, but I can't remember his first name, but he takes this position. They believe that this letter and Ephesians were written by somebody other than Paul years later, who signed Paul's name and everything, pretended to be Paul, but that everybody knew that it wasn't Paul. I mean, they knew who it was. Okay, some person that was a follower of Paul, and it's called a pseudepigraphy when you do it. But now I'm going to tell you. I have spent a lot of time on this. I don't see one piece of evidence that any personal letter was ever written within the church, a personal letter from me, when I write from me to you and names, by somebody other than the author, pretending to be that somebody. What they say is, this letter has got some stuff in it. Doesn't look like Paul. We kind of doubt it. It's got words in it he doesn't use all the time, et cetera, et cetera. And so they say, well, this is somebody who was an apostle of Paul, if you will, a disciple of Paul. And he was just kind of filling in what Paul would have said if Paul had lived. Okay, you with me? I'm telling you, half of them say that. They make a case for that. Okay. Well, as I said here, there's nothing, no one ever suggested anything like this until the 1800s. Okay? And the other thing, that's one for me, for thinking this is Paul. And there's several pieces of writing in that first century that suggest from people one generation, 2 generations later who say, no way, there's no way we don't accept any book of pseudepigraphy by somebody other than the author claiming to be him. And they don't even talk about personal letters, by the way. That's out. But they're talking about some gospel of Peter. And they're saying, we don't accept that. Our fathers didn't receive it. It wasn't apostolic. We don't receive it. Okay? So, you'll read that. I throw it out. Why do you say, well, Jack, why are you doing this to me? Because it says it's him, and I believe that. Because people think you're doofuses out there when you're studying with somebody who has studied, believes, or may be religious. Okay? Because you don't know that. Okay, that a lot in the world think it is. So you need to have some rationale, at least know that there's a lot of folks that think that. All right, so the 1800s, until the 1800s, nobody said it. Again, Paul, he's an apostle. It says he's an apostle of Jesus Christ by the will of God. Timothy, our brother, and then he ends and says, I, Paul, write this greeting with my own hand. Remember my chains. This is a personal letter. Okay? All right. Almost all of the conservative people dismiss this. They don't dismiss it outright. They say, it's okay, but we have no evidence. So they do dismiss it. All right? Okay. I know. You don't need that. But now you have it. If somebody brings it up and says you're a doofus, you think you know. You say, no, I know. But we just reject that. Okay. All right, the recipients, it says, and there's one final thing. The same people, authors that say this was written by somebody other than Paul, swear that Philemon was written by Paul. Same time and same peoples and issues, okay? Okay. And by the way, I'll add one other thing. If you're going to fake a letter to a congregation, why would you fake a letter to Podunk? Colossae is Podunk. It's the smallest city. It has nothing to it. Hierapolis is there, Laodicea. You see what I mean? It's just unlikely. It has too many marks of no. All right. So the recipients are Christians in Colossae. All right? All right. And this is where I did make note that the Colossians were said that the Laodiceans read your letter and you read theirs. Any questions? Comments? Okay. Colossae, it's my second favorite book in the New Testament. And Troy and I had to talk about this. We'll go through it all, but he marked me by the two books that I like the best. Okay. And I think you can be marked if you would, I'll be honest, and say which are the two books you like the best. But anyway, back to this. The Christological statement. Read Mark verse in first chapter 15 through 20. And the scholars go wild. Was this an existing hymn or a poem that Paul put in here? Did he do it or did he steal it from somebody? It doesn't exist anywhere else. I think Paul wrote it. Okay? He's fully capable of writing. He's got a PhD in religion. Did you know that? Sure he does. Look where he studied. Gamaliel. He's a talented fellow. So at any rate, read this Christological statement. It is the most amazing thing. Read 15, do yourself a favor. Read 15, 16, and 17. And then if you can put it right next to them, put 18, 19, and 20. It's parallel. There's parallel there. It's amazing. It's an amazing piece of work. Greatest Christological statement in the Bible, probably. Okay. 2:8, 2:8, and 2:9, probably my favorite verses in there. 2:8 is the beware verse, tells you what you best not do, what you need to beware. And then verse 2:9 is my starting place when somebody says, and they have within the Marine Corps and the studies I did there many times, where in the Bible does it say that Jesus is God? It doesn't say that. You guys are making that up. It doesn't say it. I've read the whole Bible, and it doesn't say that. Okay? Well, let's don't read the whole Bible. Let's just start out. And I want to go to 2:9 and look at that. Read it yourself right now. You cannot, then they'll folks say, well, what does it say in the Greek? Because, if you don't like what it says in your language, that's what you always say. I even do that sometimes. It's goofy to do that. And I'm not a Greek scholar. So what does it say in the Greek? Okay, yeah, so I've had that said, and it says the same thing in the Greek. And we just went through that the other day, didn't we, Troy? It says the same thing, and He's God. Christ is God. Okay. And then, of course, Christianity in practice. What does Christianity look like when you're at home, when you're at the office, etc.? That's chapter 3, 18 through 4:1. You want to know? Just read it. And if you don't like that by itself, go to the twin and you'll find a similar, but even a little more expansive. Remember, 155 verses are there. 95 verses are in Colossians. Okay, because it's my favorite, and here I feel like I can put it down here. That's the beware verse. Beware lest anyone take you captive through philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits. That is, we're going to debate that, what that says, elemental spirits. I don't think that's really what that says, but it can, it's okay. Spirits of the world, not according to Christ. And then 9, that's my starting verse for Jesus is God. Because in Him all of the fullness of deity dwells bodily. Okay? All right, city of Colossae. It's about 100 miles east of Ephesus in the valley of the river Lycus. Lycus is a small river, almost a creek. There's a mountain right by Colossae, Mount Cadmus, okay, about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. It's about 12 miles from Laodicea and Hierapolis, cities that are certainly better known, more important, okay? All right. The city of Colossae. Paul likely never preached there, I think that's interesting. Why is he writing them then? He never preached, if he never preached there. He learned it by report. It says that in the letter, chapter 1, 4, and 8. He learned about it from Epaphras, who apparently came to Rome and said, man, I've got these congregations that, I brought the gospel to, et cetera, et cetera. He said, there's some weird stuff going on. How do I handle it? And so this letter, I think, is dealing with that. His face was unknown to him, it says in 2:1. And I've told you this already, okay? When he was in Ephesus for 3 years, we know that he was teaching. And here's what I believe has happened, is Epaphras has gotten to Ephesus during that time, to his, I'm going to call it a school of preaching. They don't say that. And he's learned the gospel, and he's gone back with the gospel, and he's taught folks in the Lycus Valley, including probably Hierapolis and Laodicea for sure, and Colossae. Okay? And as you see, you can look at verse 19, talks about him moving from when the synagogues, he can't operate there anymore. He goes to this school, and he teaches there a couple years. Verse 31 says he was there for 3 years. 3 years in Ephesus, teaching. People in Asia, it says in Acts 19, it says they were hearing the gospel. How were they hearing? Epaphras, people like him. He was training people. He was sending them out. It says Epaphras was a native of Colossae. He was from there. I think he's likely taught by Paul. And he's responsible, I think, for planting the church. Thank God for Epaphras, who you probably don't ever think about. Okay, it says he labored very hard for the ministry and he prays fervently. Again, we'll hit these verses. So, the Church of Colossae, it was mostly Gentiles. How do I get that? I just read the first chapter there. I'm looking at the sins that are committed. They're really sins that are common for Gentiles, okay, not Jews. That's their characteristic to me. All right. So it's a lot of Gentiles there. Didn't say there wasn't any Jews, but there were a lot of Gentile church. All right. Questions? Comment? Thought? I know it's a fire hose. When we're doing hopefully as we do a verse by verse, which we will do, we'll hit many or most of these things. Okay, so Paul felt. Yes. I can. Oh, okay. Can you hear now? Yes or no? No? Usually I get in trouble for talking too loud. Let me.
It's when you go down to your regular conversation.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'm sorry. How about that? Better? Okay, thank you. All right. The Church of Colossae. Let's talk just a little more about this. Real quickly, I don't know. We're going to talk about. We'll talk about what was the problem there that Paul was addressing, and you'll hear it talked about as the Colossian heresy. I don't know whether there's one heresy or not, but there's certainly several things going on that he addresses. Whether or not it was combined, syncretism is a big word. It's a fancy word. But it just means that various religions start putting stuff together. They start putting their ideas together, and they come out as one religion with might take something from Judaism, something from some other pagan faith, and Christianity, and marry it up. It's a mesh of religions. Now, am I close to stopping time? You going to tell me? Yeah? Because I can go. Okay, so that's syncretism. That seems to be what's in play here, okay? And we'll talk about that. Now, here's the trades that were going on there at Colossae were sheep and dyeing wool. That was their money makers. That's what they're famous for, if you will. Okay. During the third preaching journey, Paul spent the 3 years in Ephesus. We'll stop in just a moment. So, as I said earlier, we talked about his arrest. We talked about him being put into jail in Caesarea Maritima, or Maritima. And now I want to end with this, I guess. Gnostics. We'll talk some about Gnostics. I want to assure you that the Gnostic religion as a system has not been conformed at this time. It's too early. But in the next century, the Gnostic problem will become a big time problem. It's the mystical stuff, very mystical, very secretive. And we're going to, as we look at this letter, I think we have pre-Gnosticism going on here. One of the basic tenets of Gnosticism is Gnostic means knowledge. That they have secret knowledge, and it's the idea from Plato, really, in Greek, the work, that material things are evil, and spiritual things are good. It's a dualism, thing. So we're going to see some of that, and I'm going to see if I can convince you that what Paul says is really putting that down as a possibility for bringing it into Christianity. Okay? A question or comment before we end? No? Anything? We'll do our introduction ending next time, and we'll jump into a verse by verse of Colossians. Okay, we're coming to the end of the class. Let me just say that while I'm in Colossians, yeah? Are you signaling to me? Okay. I can print any of it that you want. What I didn't want to do is print more than somebody wants. But yes, print it and or make it available for download, any of it that you'd like to look at. So let me know if it's all or something in particular. Okay, Paul is, we've seen what Paul did for the faith. Basically spent his life for the gospel. Endured more than I can imagine for the gospel. Sometimes some of us have spent time with people and been put off by them and thought, man, what a hard time that is. At least I have. But nothing like Paul did. I want to read something that he wrote here, and then I'll ask you if you have anything that you need to do. In the first chapter, verse 13 and 14, Paul says this. Now think about what Paul had endured. He's in jail because of the gospel. He says, He, God, has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. And that's what we get as we leave the darkness and go to the light and become Christians. So I guess if there's anybody here, I don't know, who's in need of study or thinks they're ready to become a Christian and put off that domain of darkness that you're in, this would be the time for that. And if there's any Christian here that has any other needs, we have elders present and brothers and sisters who can pray at this time. If you want to come forward, please do now.